It would now seem that Piers Morgan owes everybody an apology. Conservatives have spent the utmost amount of time trying to guilt trip left-wing liberal people into going soft on Trump in 2024 with the election coming up and not being honest about the fact that he is an election denier and someone who opposes and obstructs democracy. They've demanded that we stop calling him a threat to democracy because at one point in the past, someone said he was literally Hitler. Now, to remind you guys, the Donald Trump campaign issued out an ad months ago in which they talked about bringing about the Fourth Reich. Donald Trump sat there and spoke about how immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. A line by line, bar for bar reiteration of language used in Mein Kampf. And then to top it all off, it has now been revealed that Donald Trump said he needs the kind of generals that Adolf Hitler had. The story continues to write itself. I'm not gonna lie, whoever's writing the season of 2024 and the story of humanity, amazing writing, by the way.
Front tonight, the breaking news, the kind of generals Hitler had. An 11th hour bombshell report from the Atlantic Jeffrey Goldberg, quoting Trump touting the loyalty of Hitler's generals and reporting that Trump complained about picking up the tab for a fallen U.S. soldier's funeral, calling her an effing Mexican. All right, well, let's start with Hitler's generals. Goldberg reporting that he asked Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, about claims that Trump once asked him, quote, "Why can't you be like the German generals?" So Goldberg then writes, well, he told me that when Trump raised the subject of German generals, Kelly responded by asking, "Do you mean Bismarck's generals?" He went on, I know he didn't know who Bismarck was or about the Franco-Prussian War. I said, "Do you mean the Kaiser's generals? Surely you cannot mean Hitler's generals." And he said, yeah, Hitler's generals. And the Atlantic goes on to cite then two more sources who were at the Trump White House. They claimed that they heard Trump say, quote, "I need the kind of generals that Hitler had, people who were totally loyal to him that follow orders." Now, tonight, a Trump spokesman shutting down.
And I knew that's what he meant, but at the same time, we can't just draw the line at that definition, that explanation only. Let's keep in mind here. Donald Trump has used racial rhetoric. He has talked about good genes. He's talked about the fact that violent migrants have bad genes. And when he was in, I believe, Minnesota, he told the people of Minnesota that they have good genes. Now, in the Midwest, most of the white people there, in case you don't know, are of Nordic descent. These people are from they're from the Scandinavian region of Europe, okay? These people had the DNA that white supremacists wish they had, okay? Like, these people come from that region of the world. Donald Trump sat there and told them they have good genes, good genetics. This guy is totally tapped into white nationalist, white supremacist rhetoric. Everyone knows it. That's what that movement represents. And the reality is, he probably doesn't just want generals who will obey him. He also wants generals who will carry out his insanely racial fantasies.
Now, tonight, a Trump spokesman shutting down that reporting, insisting that Trump never said this. But the campaign is nonetheless pushing back. They don't want this to be. What impact does something like this have? But the campaign very much, Jeff Zeleny, in such important context. Let's start here with a panel. But Margaret, let me start with you. Trump's reported comments on Hitler. And an interesting, Jeff's view, right, that in firing up the base and in people's minds being hardened, what impact does something like this have? But the campaign is nonetheless pushing back. They don't want this to be something that takes off. They're saying it's absolutely false. So you end up in a story here where it appears it's John Kelly versus Trump.
Yeah, look, if you have followed every twist and turn of the things that are reported to have been said in the White House to Trump's top advisors over many years, this new report is simultaneously chilling, outlandish, and totally believable because it tracks with what we have come to know about Donald Trump as somebody who deeply cares about power and authority and has become this sort of demagogic figure that adores dictators and authoritarians and complete yes men, and yet never really achieved that. This is the adoration for Putin, the adoration for Orban, the adoration for every dictator or authoritarian who he met and sometimes really kowtowed to. It seems believable. On the other hand, the people that we need to win now, if you're Kamala Harris, and I say we as somebody who is a Republican who is for Harris, are low propensity voters, low information voters, where these twists and turns are not what they are going to vote over. This is about the couch, right? It's about the term is they're trying to get voters off the couch. If you are not voting and you're only tuning in and it is 2 weeks from today, a comment that Trump made off the record or in private about Hitler isn't going to get you to the voting booth.
So
I disagree with this. Every single piece of information, any single thing you can gather up to use in this election, you need to use it. This idea that you can just sit on stuff like this and, the voters don't care about this. The reality of the situation is a lot of people do care about this. Donald Trump has praised dictators. We know that Donald Trump has a history of demanding full and total power over everything. When the dude sat there and got charged with trying to overthrow an election, he didn't sit there and say, I'm innocent. He sat there and said, I'm immune. I should never be held accountable for anything I do ever. This is not a guy this is a guy whose language and actions completely line up with this report. Now, whether or not he sat there and said those things about that young woman who's Mexican, I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and say he did or didn't say that. Nothing surprises me with him as to what he would or wouldn't say. But as it pertains to the comments about having the kind of generals that Hitler had, Donald Trump has praised Orban. He has praised Kim Jong-un. He has praised Putin. He speaks highly only of leaders who engage in authoritarian autocratic behavior. He only praises them. He only speaks highly of them. I've never ever heard of him speaking highly of a single individual that is a world leader amongst our allies. Never have I ever heard him speak positively about them once. Donald Trump saying these things, doing these things, it should be highlighted. Not a single thing he says or does that is outrageous, outlandish, and insane should ever be tossed aside, ignored, put away for later. All of it is important. Not a single piece of it is just something you can just get over, or, it's not that big of a deal. Voters care about other things. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Conservatives will stop at nothing to spin narratives. Narratives are given to us by the truth. Donald Trump really is this guy. They make shit up. I did a video 2 days ago where they falsely accused Kamala Harris of telling people who said Jesus is Lord that they're at the wrong rally. They're making stuff up. They're literally splicing audio to create narratives. We can't even take the truth. More than likely it's true. We can't even take the truth and use it to our advantage. It's very, very important for people to be willing to play the game the way it needs to be played and playing to win. Any mistake the Trump campaign makes, any information that comes out about the Trump campaign needs to be highlighted at all times. At all times. It should never, ever, 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 ever be cast aside or ignored because we're not sure if the voters are going to care about it. Kamala Harris has done an amazing job of speaking about her plan. Donald Trump has concepts of a plan. And then when you look into the kind of conversations he has with people behind the scenes, come to find out, Donald Trump is the guy who wants the kind of generals that Adolf Hitler had. Which lines up with his Hitler-esque rhetoric, which lines up with his good genes commentary, which lines up with his love for dictators. This is totally insane that this race is even close. It goes to show how uninformed the average American voter is and how susceptible they are to misinformation. And also, it also highlights how much Americans are willing to give up democracy, rule of law, racial unity, gender unity. They're willing to give up everything that makes our nation stable and united in exchange for this ridiculous fantasy in which you're going to make Mexico build a wall, you're going to expel every illegal immigrant, you're going to put tariffs on Chinese goods to stick it to China, even though American companies and American consumers are going to foot the bill. Americans are basically it is just a reality of being uninformed. Americans are so uninformed, we're willing to completely shoot ourselves in the foot just so we can feel like we're sticking it to the enemy. us versus them, this ridiculous, childish, like fascistic game of trying to create this villain for everyone to attack. The fact that this race is this close, again, is totally insane, and it is the result of the insane world that we live in. It is what it is. I don't know what's going on. This timeline is crazy.